President Trump is currently on a significant visit to Saudi Arabia, where he is attending a state dinner. Given the elaborate welcome he received, it's likely that the dinner is equally grand. This visit marks the beginning of his 4-day tour across the Middle East. The primary objective of this visit is to secure $1 trillion in investment in the U.S. from the Saudis. So far, they have committed to $600 billion, as promised by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, which will be invested in various sectors including defense, infrastructure, and AI. This investment is a significant part of the trip. Additionally, NBS has indicated that they will reach the $1 trillion investment mark over time. President Trump received a royal welcome, with Arabian stallions escorting his vehicle. Additionally, a custom-built mobile McDonald's truck was provided for his stay in Saudi Arabia, which he likely appreciated. As the president took the stage for his remarks, a rendition of "God Bless the USA" could be heard. He highlighted the growing strength of the new Middle East, where a new generation of leaders is moving beyond past conflicts and divisions, focusing on commerce rather than chaos, technology rather than terrorism, and building cities together rather than engaging in destructive conflicts. Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy is covering the event live from Riyadh. Martha, since President Trump returned to office in January, today's achievements seem relatively straightforward. He arrived on Air Force One, expressed satisfaction with the $600 billion commitment, but aimed for $1 trillion. Within 4 hours, the Crown Prince pledged exactly that. In the coming months, efforts will be made to finalize the remaining agreements to reach the $1 trillion mark. The visit wasn't solely about business deals. At a business forum, President Trump discussed his intention to lift sanctions on Syria soon, following a meeting with Syria's interim president tomorrow to help the country prosper. He also pledged to assist Saudi Arabia in defending itself against Iran and its proxies, and to strive for a deal with Iran to prevent them from acquiring nuclear weapons. As he has demonstrated repeatedly, he is willing to resolve past conflicts and form new partnerships for a better and more stable world, even if the differences are profound, as they are with Iran. He believes in not having permanent enemies, but sometimes enemies are necessary to achieve goals, and it must be done correctly. Between performances by Lee Greenwood as the opening act and the Village People as the closing act, President Trump emphasized to the mixed crowd of Americans and Saudi business people that he wants his legacy to be as a peacemaker in the Middle East. Fox News alert: peace and trade are at the forefront as President Trump meets with Crown Prince NBS for a historic summit in Saudi Arabia. Former Secretary of State, Fox News contributor, and CIA Director Mike Pompeo joins us now. Mike, what are your thoughts on what you've seen so far? The president enjoys the pomp and circumstance, but I understand he's also spending quality time with NBS. What do you expect them to discuss? They will likely discuss various topics, including the deep connections between the U.S. economy and Saudi Arabia's economy. Saudi Arabia is an important business partner and a major energy producer. They will also discuss geopolitical challenges, including the situation with Israel and the ongoing war in Europe. Both leaders want to resolve these issues quickly. Do you think Saudi Arabia wants the U.S. and Israel to take military action against Iran's nuclear program? Undoubtedly, the nations most at risk from the Iranian regime are not 6,000 miles away. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has had ballistic missiles land in their country directly from Iran, and the Houthis in Yemen frequently fire rockets into Saudi Arabia. They want the United States, Israel, and all rights-respecting nations to take down this regime to ensure security for people in Riyadh, Jeddah, and across the region. Yesterday's story was that Russia and Iran are trying to prolong negotiations because they believe time is on their side. The Iranian foreign minister met with Saudi Arabia's NBS. Can you piece this together for us? The Trump administration, with limited time left, moves quickly. If you're Vladimir Putin, the Ayatollah, or Xi Jinping, you're facing the toughest U.S. president who will defend U.S. interests everywhere. Delaying decisions and pushing things out creates time and space, which is in their interest. I'm confident that the three of them are working together to extend these negotiations to delay doing what the United States wants. How much more time do you give Iran to agree to zero enrichment, dismantle their nuclear program, and stop their missile program? Brian, the probability of the Iranians agreeing to full, verifiable denuclearization with inspections, no enrichment, destroying their missiles and missile program, and stopping terror is zero. The time is now. They are at their weakest point in a long time, not because of the Biden administration, but despite it. The Israelis and the United States should do everything possible to ensure Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. I'm confident we have the tools, skills, and capabilities to achieve that. The whole world, including Saudi Arabia and the UAE, will be thankful for our silent work. They won't say it publicly, but behind the scenes, they will let you know. Some of those cables have been exposed through various leaks. They fear what Iran represents in the region. Lastly, regarding Russia and Ukraine, a European leader said a few days ago that there would be no ceasefire or peace talks without a ceasefire. The next day, Putin said he would have peace talks on Thursday, one-on-one. Trump came in with Truth Social and said to Zelensky, "Take the deal." So Zelensky is going to Istanbul on Thursday. Has Putin been outmaneuvered? I hope Putin shows up. I suspect he will not without enormous pressure from the United States. There's no doubt that Zelensky did the right thing by saying he's in and happy to sit down straight across the table from Putin for this conversation. And he's happy to do a 30-day ceasefire to get there. President Trump is in, and President Zelensky is in. We've seen that Putin has very little interest in peace or a ceasefire. He wants to drag this on. We'll see what happens in 48 hours. But Mr. Secretary, he called the meeting and demanded it. He got what he wanted. How does he not show up? Brian, I'll bet you've done that. Called a meeting once in a while and didn't show. He'll do what Putin does. Deny, lie, evade. He won't have any moral qualms about no showing the meeting. He'll come up with a silly reason saying that Zelensky didn't agree to something. He's trying to figure out what's in his best interest, and he has concluded that it's not peace, but continued aggression. We'll continue to seek your perspective on what's going on with the president's first overseas trip, especially as he moves through the Middle East. Good morning. President Trump is making significant deals in the desert, pumping up the crowd, with YMCA and God Bless the USA as he impresses Saudi Arabia, securing $600 billion in investments from the Saudis and the largest arms deal ever at $142 billion. The Saudis rolled out the royal purple carpet and extended a warm welcome by having white Arabian horses flank his motorcade. Salesman Trump pitched a shared golden age of prosperity for the U.S. and the Middle East. Today, we reaffirm this important bond and take the next steps to make our relationship closer, stronger, and more powerful than ever before. The Biden administration, the worst in our country's history, spurned our most trusted and long-standing Gulf partners. We have none stronger, and nobody like the gentleman right before me. He's your greatest representative, and if I didn't like him, I'd get out of here so fast. You know that, don't you? He knows me well. I do. I like him a lot. I like him too much. That's why we give so much. You know, too much. I like you too much. Dopey Dems, on the other hand, can't bring themselves to celebrate all the delicious deals Trump's cooking up for the country. This is President Trump's corruption tour of the Middle East. He is going to the Gulf to collect tribute. What's happening here is an extraordinary level of corruption. We shouldn't pretend this is business, as usual. Well, Trump is not asking for any benefit to the American people. He's not asking for any movement towards peace in the region. He's asking for cash. So Dana, what's wrong with securing investment deals from our partners in the Middle East? Well, what's interesting is that for Chris Murphy, it's like for the last 4 years, you were championing the Inflation Reduction Act. And what did that do? It drove up inflation and had all these green new scams in it, which you could give to all of your donors, many of whom have now gone bankrupt. So, I don't like the idea of the plane, but we're not talking about that right now because I don't think that's necessarily happening. What's interesting is that when President Trump signed the economic agreement this morning, he signs the economic agreement. Then Secretary of Defense Pete Hegg signs the defense agreement. A lot of the economic agreement and the defense agreement are intertwined because Saudi wants protection, and so if you're going to get the protection, you need to have the weaponry, and the weaponry is made by us. And so that is a good thing. And I think it's been a pretty good week for the president's economic agenda. Aside from that, the inflation number was good today. One of the big banks, JP Morgan, really scaled back its projection for a recession after that China deal got announced. For 90 days, and House Republicans are actually really moving forward on the big, beautiful bill that could get done. So, I would say it's a pretty good week, and it's only Tuesday. It's only Tuesday, and that tax bill will really juice things. Greg, a lot of people don't know this about you, but you require your rides to be flanked by white Arabian horses when you arrive here. Yes, I was a little worried about that because he also has the mobile McDonald's. Yes, so it makes you wonder what meat they're using. They never rolled out the red carpet for Joe Biden because they were worried about the cleaning bill. But, it's interesting. So, he has this mobile McDonald's following him. It's just like a regular McDonald's except the hamburger is missing a hand for stealing. Yeah, they do that there. They do that there. I think you're right. No, this is a great week. It's only Tuesday because it says a lot about the mindset with Trump. It feels like almost anything is possible because he's a doer. He's not a talker. He's a man of action. He's got aspirational designs for the country. He wants to be the greatest president ever, and that directly benefits us. Even if it's for his own ego, it doesn't matter. They align properly with our needs. He's America's lawyer, America's agent. He's in the room on our behalf. Doesn't seem like an existential risk to me, Marie, but maybe you see it differently, and he doesn't care what the world thinks. That's a liberal thing. Successful people do not care what other people think, or else they'd never be successful. And if you compare this again to the previous administration, that was lip service. This is real service. Anything is possible with Trump. The Democrats never thought anything was possible. And I think I realized why. To them, winning the election is the job. For Trump, the job comes after the election. And I think that's when we're talking about Biden. They didn't care that he was barely alive because he already won. But for now, we begin outnumbered. I'm Kaylee McEnany here with my co-host Emily Campagno. Also joining us are Lisa Booth, Fox News political analyst, Molly Hemingway, Fox News contributor, and Kevin O'Leary, chairman of O'Leary Venture Capital. But first, let's start with Lucas Tomlinson. He is in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, with the latest. Lucas, you were in that room for a little bit. I believe you're now outside. What are you seeing? Well, Kaylee, as you pointed out, we've come a long way from President Biden's fist bump. President Trump is making his first official overseas trip here in Saudi Arabia, just like he did during his first term, and he was very hopeful. He talked about the success in Saudi Arabia, saying that in just 8 short years, he's seen more skyscrapers and more investment. In fact, earlier today, President Trump and the Saudi Crown Prince agreed on a $600 billion investment in the United States. And that includes the largest arms deal ever, $142 billion. And again, here's President Trump on why he's so hopeful about the future between the United States and Saudi Arabia. Before our eyes, a new generation of leaders is transcending the ancient conflicts and tired divisions of the past and forging a future where the Middle East is defined by commerce, not chaos, where it exports technology, not terrorism, and where people of different nations, religions, and creeds are building cities together, not bombing each other out of existence. Now, speaking of bombing, it was interesting when President Trump brought up Iran during his remarks. He said that they cannot have a nuclear weapon. We knew this before, but what he said afterwards was interesting. He said he would inflict maximum pressure on Iran. There was no talk anymore about bombing Iran. And you mentioned the sanctions, Kaylee. That's very notable because, of course, the new Sunni president of Syria, after the Assad regime fell, he is a former U.S.-sanctioned terrorist. He was with the Nusra Front. He fought against the United States. But people are hopeful. Bear with. Me, because they don't want to see Iran going back into the country. They don't want to see Syria being used as a former forward operating base by the Iranian regime. And you mentioned in your open, President Trump had some pretty harsh words for those who came before him, not just President Biden, who, of course, infamously called the Saudi crown visit here during the midterms in 2022. He had some harsh words about his predecessors, the nation builders, if you will. Let's roll the tape. The gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal non-profits, like those who spent trillions and trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul, Baghdad, and so many other cities. In the end, the so-called nation builders wrecked far more nations than they built. And the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves. And so again, President Trump, he's back, and what he's doing is solidifying the relationship. It's notable that this is his first stop on his first official overseas tour in the present. He gave a lot of plaudits to the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who was notable when he arrived here. I'm not sure if you have the video to roll, but when Air Force One arrived here in Riyadh, there was the Crown Prince at the bottom of the stairs from Air Force One. You did not see that when President Biden came here in 2022. There were Saudi F-15s escorting Air Force One here to Saudi Arabia. A very hopeful message and a restoration of this relationship here between the Saudis and the Americans. And it was very notable, Kaylee. One last thing, President Trump. And he walked out to give his big speech here in Riyadh in front of, by the way, the Fortune 500. He walked out to Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. Ladies and gentlemen, yes. Well, Lucas, keep us updated. There have been rumblings about a diplomatic deliverable, possibly, so keep us updated if you hear more. Thank you very much. You know, Kevin, there was an administration official who said to Politico's Dasha Burns, I thought it was a great question that kind of sums up the difference between Biden and what we're seeing with Trump. When was the last time that you had a president do such a heavy foreign trip focused almost exclusively on investment? It's a great question. And we heard him there talk about the first 3 rows, who, he said they toss and turn at night. And he said, you worry about the ones who don't toss and turn because they don't take you to the promised land, meaning the investors, the businessmen. You're a tosser and a turner. What do you make of the remarks the president said in his remarks? There are no permanent enemies, only permanent interests, is what he's imputing there. And really, what's going on with this trip are 2 things. One is China. He doesn't want China to develop a relationship in what I call the Middle East circle of friendship, and that is Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. And then you ask yourself, why are all these AI guys with him? What's with that? And I'll tell you what it's about. At the end of this week, he has a meeting in Abu Dhabi. And what's happened in the last 2 years, maybe it's taken 3, but the US is number 1 in AI development and spending. Number 2 is China. Number 3 now, and very advanced in certain verticals, is the United Arab Emirates. They are so far ahead in many different verticals, and he wants to see that cooperation on AI be removed from the China model because remember, there was talk about the UAE starting to talk to China about AI. He doesn't want any of that. He wants these companies to form very strong bonds in AI. And when we get later this week to the UAE, that's what you're going to hear about. This is crucial. So, China and AI, and of course, all this money talks. Fantastic. But we're in an economic war with China, and he is cutting them off at the pass in the fastest growing region on Earth, the Middle East. Emily, and here are some of the CEOs and businessmen he had lunch with. You can see their pictures here. Elon Musk, Larry Fink, Sam Altman, Reid Hoffman, Jensen Huang, among others. We talked about throughout the atrocities that Hamas has committed on the Israeli people, especially in light of, the hostage situation for almost 600 days and the like. We talked about that. The surrounding countries wanted a path to peace in the form of commerce, and that they were absolutely open to and supported recognizing the Jewish state, its independence, and its sovereignty in the long-term investment for the betterment of their people in the way of commerce, i.e., that yes, business rules, and that it is sort of an archaic past that they were trying to leave behind. And I appreciated so much the president with his point here. all about investment, all about the future of business, and offering a path forward. He said you hit the nail on the head. He said, there are no permanent enemies. I don't feel that way. And I am offering, he said, a new path. While I condemn today the past actions of Iranian leaders, I offer a new path, an alternative to peace and commerce and partnership. And I'm so grateful for that optimistic and peace-loving approach that will benefit everyone. And Lisa, I think that new path will in time include a normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Well, yeah. He talked about the golden age of the Middle East. The line that stood out to me was the one we just saw on the screens. The future of the Middle East is commerce, not chaos, because President Trump sees the connection between economic deals and national security in a way that's unique to his background as a businessman. And so that's why this $600 billion investment from Saudi Arabia is so important. And he also discussed inheriting this dangerous world from President Biden. And we saw the increased closeness with Iran, China, and Russia. And so, in part, what he's doing in the Middle East is trying to counter that. To Kevin's point as well, concerns that Iran will become a nuclear country, concerns with Russia and energy, concerns with China's coziness with the Gulf states, particularly with Saudi Arabia's entry into BRICS. And so, I find that line the most interesting and most unique to President Trump with that business background. Molly, you expressed some jubilation when you heard him call out the nation builders. Yeah, I just, first of all, want to point out that Reid Hoffman is sitting there in the front row, and he secretly financed so much of the Democrat lawfare against Trump and other people. So, I guess that's an example of no permanent enemies. Kind of surprising to see him there, but yes, this is peace through strength and prosperity through partnerships. He calls out the warmongers who find it very easy to enter into war without a plan or strategy for how to succeed. And he said that the people who are nation builders had wrecked far more nations than they had built, and the interventionists were intervening in complex societies that they did not understand. He says we're not doing that anymore, and instead, we're building a strong economy through this partnership with other people. It's a very different approach than what our country was subjected to for the past few decades. Yeah, the past few decades, regardless of which party was in control of the White House. That's exactly right. All right, let's bring in Ellie Cohan. She served as the deputy envoy for the State Department during President Trump's first term. She was also on the shortlist to be the UN ambassador as well. Ellie, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for having me. Good morning, guys. Just your top thoughts of what the president is doing for his first foreign trip with the peace aspect of this, and plus, obviously, the economic development as well. Well, Lawrence, this is a historic first foreign visit for the president in his second term. And I believe for President Trump and for so many of us who had the honor of serving under him, there's a sense of unfinished business from the first term. The president, as you know, left the Middle East region with peace with the Abraham Accords. And if we lived in an honest world, he should have received the Nobel Peace Prize for it. So this is an opportunity to go back to the region, re-strengthen the bilateral ties with one of our most important allies, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, bring prosperity to the American people, because we're talking about $1 trillion possibly of investment back to the United States. And then there's also the peace part. The notion of possibly ceding the expansion of the Abraham Accords. We know that the region right now with Israel and Gaza, still Israel-Hamas still having conflict in Gaza, with Iran talks going on. We know the region is not quite ready for Saudi normalization, but certainly those conversations are taking place. And I want to just hit on Iran real quick. This trip gives the president face-to-face opportunity to have very delicate conversations. We know that the president is certainly giving the Iran talks a real opportunity for success, but I have no doubt they're also talking about potential Plan B, and those are conversations that have to take place face-to-face. And so that's all taking place right now. Ellie, you're a refugee from Iran. What do you make of Iran going to Saudi Arabia before President Trump does? And what do you know about their nuclear weapons? I watched one interview, and he said a guy said they're 4 months away. Exactly. Right, Ainsley. The Iranians and the Saudis are historical enemies, Sunni-Shia rift between them. Unfortunately, under the Biden administration, we saw China actually broker a deal between Iran and the Saudis, diplomatic return of relations between them. But again, this is an opportunity now with President Trump back in the White House to bring the entire region back into the American influence and distance them from China. There is no trust between the Saudis and the Iranians. And so I think that the Saudis are in a difficult bind. On the one hand, they don't want to see us going to a regional war, and on the other hand, they certainly don't want the Iranians to have nuclear weapons capability. Well, the problem is, the Israelis feel kind of isolated at this moment, and hopefully it's temporary. Communication could reinvigorate, but it has to be zero enrichment. You can't say, well, 3%, 2%. I'm worried about some mixed messages. Coming from Steve Witkoff in an interview with Sean Hannity. He said, we got to make sure the enrichment is low. It's got to be zero. And does that worry people that sometimes there's a mixed message coming from the administration? Brian, I think if you listen to the president, he said it so many times, he will not allow the Iranians to have nuclear weapons capability. He said just last week that he thinks low enrichment is not capable, but all you have to do is increase the enrichment. Yeah, but the president has said that he means business, and he thinks the Iranians understand that he means business. And to me, that is very clear that we're talking about full dismantling of the nuclear weapons program in Iran, no centrifuges. The president even said something along the lines of either we're going to blow it up nicely or we're going to blow it up not nicely. And when he's talking about their nuclear weapons program and like the Libya model, where we blow up their facilities. So, I don't think President Trump could be any clearer. And the region needs to kind of just give him the time to go through. How unpopular is the Iranian government with the Iranian people? Incredibly unpopular. As we've seen, Brian, every time the Iranian people have been given the opportunity, they've taken to the streets, they've protested, they've put their own lives on the line. The Iranian regime has always taken very brutal crackdowns, killing over 1,500 people in the last round of protests against the regime, blinding others in the eyes, and they commit the worst human rights abuses. How do they do that? They actually have shot protesters in the eye, willingly blinding them. And Ainsley, they commit the worst human rights abuses to those who end up in political prisons in Iran. So this is a very brutal regime, and every time the people have taken to the streets, they crack down very, very brutally on them. But the Iranian people have shown over and again that they seek freedom, they seek peace, and they love America. They are hoping the people want to get reunited into the nations. Ellie, now that we have you here, we can't let you go away without commenting on what's going to happen in Turkey. What do you see Putin coming to the table? Does he show up for the meeting? Zelensky has made it very clear, and we may see the President of the United States show up if there's a deal to be signed. Yeah, well, and I think that's the last point is exactly right. If there's a deal to be signed, I think the President knows these players very well. His relationship with Putin now we know goes back many years, and he spent time now with Zelensky. So I think he's got a good sense of the players and how serious they are or not. I don't see the President using his own political capital to go to Turkey unless there is absolutely a deal to be signed. But if there is, so much of that is because of the amount of time the President has invested in that process. And truly, if you look at the entire world, we see a president who's dedicated to bringing peace to every continent. Right? But if the thing is, if he shows up and all the delegations are there, and there's no deal done, is because Russia has impossible demands. So it's on Russia, and that would isolate him even more. I think the president, it's a no-lose situation. If the other two show up and the president shows up, I think he shows that he's a part of it and he helped get them together. Yeah, well, with the force of his personality, I agree. He may not, but if he does show up, Ryan, to your point, he's probably the only person on earth who can make a deal go through. Would he be able to do that, though, from a national security perspective? Wouldn't they have to go in early? His team would have to go in and make sure it's safe. I think they would definitely lay out all that groundwork in advance of the president going there. And interestingly, we see that Secretary Rubio is with the president, Defense Minister Pete Hegseth. So many people on the president's team are with him right now. And Ainsley, I think they would certainly make sure that all of the stage is set for him before he would arrive. Something else really interesting happened. The PKK, the Kurdish group that Turkey despises, disbanded. And I'm wondering what happened behind the scenes to make a group that Turkey does not like just suddenly disband. And I'm wondering if that plays into it or if they got security guarantees, because the Kurds have been unbelievably loyal to Americans. Yeah, they are unbelievably loyal to Americans. They've been an important ally in the region as well, to Israel and to other moderate states in the entire region. And so, we certainly hope that the Kurds are protected in this entire process. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Great to see you. Fascinating time. Let's bring in Brian Hook. He served as special representative for Iran during President Trump's first administration. He was also senior advisor and then secretary to then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Along with Pompeo, he was targeted by Iran because of the administration's hardline stance towards the country. Brian, welcome. Very good to have you here. What is your reaction to what the president had to say about his visit to Saudi Arabia? The meaning of it, especially with regard to the message it sends to Iran? Well, in 2017, he made a speech in Riyadh, and at the end of the speech he talked about wanting to create new partnerships. And out of that grew the Abraham Accords 3.5 years later. So here he is, 8 years later in Saudi Arabia, and he's talking again about new partnerships that could include Syria. He lifted sanctions on Syria after 10 years of civil war in Syria. I think the Iranian people would like to be on very good terms with Israel. The regime, the Iranian regime, does not. But Saudi Arabia could come and normalize with Israel new partnerships for peace. And so while there's a lot of deal-making going on, there is also a really large component of stabilizing the Middle East, moderating the extremism. MBS has been a great leader in that regard. And you know, the Gulf really represents the new Middle East that President Trump was talking about, and this trip helps bring that Middle East into existence. Yeah, I thought it was very interesting in those comments. We just played from President Trump. He talked about technology, not terrorism. And the AI part of this deal that they are working on, you know, obviously has to make places like China stand up and take notice as well, Brian. Yeah, the AI component is big. I saw that Sam Altman from OpenAI is on this trip, and that'll be a focus in Saudi. But it'll also be a focus in UAE. UAE under Sheikh Tahnoon is a leader in AI. And you know, they're talking about 1.3 trillion of new investment in the United States. AI is going to be a part of that. I think for these countries in the Gulf to continue on their positive path, which is the opposite of the Iranian regime's path, AI is a big part of it. And the United States leads on AI, and having all of these leaders in tech come to the Middle East, tech not terrorism, is a really good message for that region, and I think it'll resonate. Let's listen to what the president said about Iran today. We'd imposed unprecedented sanctions on Iran and starved the regime of resources to fund terror. They were unable to fund anything because they had no money left. They had no money. But the new administration came in and let them have a lot of money. And you saw what happened. Was not money well spent? So what would a deal with Iran look like? And do you have confidence that they would ever give up their nuclear weapons work, their enrichment of uranium, and ever agree to having it moved potentially to a third-party country? Well, there's been 3 or 4 rounds of talks so far with the Iranians that's been led by Steve Witkoff, the president's lead negotiator. The Iranian regime is not negotiating from a position of strength. Thanks to Israel, they've lost most of their proxies. Their last functioning proxy are the Houthis, and the president, President Trump, has waged a pretty significant bombing campaign to degrade them. And so if the Iranians were smart, they would take the very sincere off-ramp that President Trump is offering them. And it's quite simple. You know, I think you know for the Iranians, you don't need to enrich to have peaceful nuclear power. UAE has peaceful nuclear power, and they don't enrich. More than half the countries in the world that have nuclear power do not enrich. It's not too much to ask of the Iranian regime. And so if we can end enrichment, I think that may be, based on what the president and Steve Witkoff has said, that may be the kind of deal they're pursuing. But I hope the Iranians do it the easy way. We'll see. Obviously, it's a huge issue of pride with a regime that has been under tremendous pressure over the recent years, especially under the Israeli dismantling of most of their proxies, as you point out, Brian Hook. Thank you very much. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Foxline Global YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.